What's good, you guys? It's Lifestyle from lifestyledidit.com, and in today's video we're going to continue with bus processing and group processing. Today we're going to be focusing on the drum bus, grouping all of our drums to one track and affecting that track, doing different things. And I'm going to show you guys a bunch of different cool ways that you can make your drums punch harder, add effects to them, make them sound more spacious with reverbs, and add interesting effects that you can use and you can automate throughout your track separately from all your leads and melodies. Let's get straight into it. And yes, as you can see, I am in FL20. I have been getting used to it a little bit more from 11. So once I'm super familiar with it, I'll be doing all my tutorials in it. So the first thing you need to do is go in here and choose one of your favorite numbers that's available. Let's just go with 23. And we could rename this to drum bus, because this is where they're all going to be going. So we're going to say drum bus, and we're going to give it a color, something obvious like blue, let's say, right? So now we have just this mixer track called drum bus, and it's pretty much available to use. What we need to do is go over to each individual part of our drums. I include every part of the drum except the 808 because I don't want to be processing that because it gets a little crazy. So we're going to go over here to the kick, right? Make sure the kick's selected. Over here on drum bus, you're going to see this little arrow. Go ahead and right click on the arrow and say route to this track only. Now you see this little green wire came over here and said, okay, when we play this, it's playing through here. So if I mute this, the kick goes away. You don't hear it anymore, right? So we're going to go to the snare. We're going to do the same thing. Make sure snare selected. We're going to go over here. We're going to right click and route to this channel. So as you can see, now the snare's in there. If we mute the drum bus, you don't hear the snare or the kick. So do that with all of your drums. Go throughout, do that with all your drums. Make sure that they're going to this bus that you named. Then we will go ahead and start with certain effects that you could do to the drums. My FL froze, so I had to restart the process, but same thing. Basically, now you see I have a few plugins loaded up, and these are the ones I'm going to be showing you guys, different things you could do with drum processing as a whole. So if I go ahead and press play, you'll hear all of our drums are going through here. If I mute this, it's muted. It's no longer playing, right? So now that we have all of our drums going through here, we can affect them as one drum bus, and we can add effects to affect the entire drum bus as one. What this means is if we add EQ to this, it's going to EQ all the drums, anything that's routed to here, right? If we add compression, if we add distortion, anything we add to it, we're affecting all the drums instead of going here and adding it on each one. So the reason I didn't put the 808 in here is because if I want to add reverb to this, right, for this drum pattern, I'm not going to want the 808 to have reverb on it. That's not something that I want to happen, or a delay or a halftime, whatever. All you see, everything on here would be really weird with the 808. So we just have the drums. So the first thing we're going to do is bring up a plugin called JST Clip, right? So you could use any clipper. This is a very aggressive clipper. That's why I'm going with it. You can get this from Joey Sturgis. He's a metal producer for like, I think 20-30 bucks maybe. He always has sales. But the reason I'm going for this one instead of other clippers, and you can use any clipper you want, but I want to show you guys new plugins as I go that I personally like to use and maybe introduce you into some cool ones. So the reason I'm using this is because it's a very, very aggressive clipper, right? He also has a built-in mix knob, which I like a lot, and a trim knob for adjusting your output of the volume. So if I go ahead and press play on this, right, and we just start messing with this ×2 knob basically means that this thing went around ×2 since it can't go around twice, right? So if we have it on 1, we're starting to push our sound into the clipper. So if I go ahead and press play, you see it starts getting aggressive, right? I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to trim it back real fast because I want to show you guys how aggressive this can get. See how nasty that can get, right? You already heard that kick. So what I like to do is come in here and adjust this to a really nasty setting on my drum bus. And then I come over here to the mix knob and I go ahead and blend it. So I start at 0, right? So if it's at 0, there's nothing happening. If I start to blend it in, it starts blending in that really raw sound. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust this to where we have something that we like, and then we're going to mess with the trim knob so when we turn it on and off, we're still peaking around the same volume. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this aggressive, and then I'm going to come in here, I'm going to mess with the mix knob, find something I like, and then we'll trim it back to the correct signal. Okay, I like how that sounds. I obviously know it's way louder, so let's go ahead and turn it off and let's look over here. We're around 6 to 5 maybe dB at some time. So let's turn this back on, come to the trim, and mess around with this till we get to around that same volume. So we need to go higher. Okay, so if we turn it off now, and we turn it on, we're around the same volume. But you hear that the drum is way louder, but it's the same peaking volume. This is the good thing about clipping, is clipping just cuts everything off and really messes the sound up in a good way. And especially this clipper, it's in a very aggressive clipper because it's made for metal styles of music to make your snare really come through. So as you could see, even though we're peaking around the same volumes on our bus, when I turn it on and off, it literally sounds like the drums are like 5 dB louder. This is a perfect example of how to use compression or clipping or limiting, all these different types of dynamic range processors to get your stuff to be louder without peaking louder. So pretty much we're around the same volume. We're around negative 6 dB, but this thing sounds so much louder. If I turn it off, if I turn it on, it's really coming through, and you're going to hear that on the mix because you're still peaking around the same volumes, but the perceived volume is way louder. Next, we can go in here and let's say we wanted to add a reverb to this whole drum bus, right? We have this cool little hip hop drum loop going, and we want to add some type of room so it sounds like they were all recorded, you know, in a drum room or something. We want them to sound a little bit more familiar to each other. So we could go in here and we could put a reverb on this actual drum bus, right? If we turn the wet knob up, you'll hear it's going to be over exaggerated and crazy. So I like to go like this. Turn dry, turn wet all the way up, and adjust my reverb. And I start to mess around with it till I get something cool, and then I'll go back it off. Alright, so I narrowed it in a little bit. Now let's go over here, turn dry all the way up, and mess with the wet knob a little bit and get a little bit of reverb. Just in the background. Now everything sounds like it's going through there. If we take the kick off, right, let's take off the snare. You still hear the rest of it with the reverb. So pretty much what we're doing is taking all of our drums, putting it into this bus and adding a reverb to it. Now it sounds more cohesive. It sounds like it's more together in the same room with the same reverb, right? So you can get creative with different types of reverb on this, and then you can adjust your dry and wet knob or come over here and adjust it here, right? Next thing I want to show you guys is, before we get into halftime, because I'm going to show you a cool thing you could do with that, is EQing. So if we turn an EQ on and we come in here, we can come over here and let me just mess with a bunch of stuff randomly, okay? Let's press play. So you hear the whole drum bus is affected. You can get super creative with this, but let's say we wanted to just really add some high-end bite to the whole drum mix. Come over here, we grab a random band, and we go hunting for a frequency of good, crispy high-end, right? So I want a lot of that snap and high-end from the snare and the hi-hat, so I'm going to go hunting around 5 to 6K. So I'm going to press play, go hunt for it, and then we'll boost from there. Okay, I like how that sounds. So let's go over here and let's kind of widen this out a little bit. We don't want it too narrow. Remember, you want to do narrow cuts, broad boosts. So I'm going to do maybe 1.5 to 2 dB, nothing crazy. And then I'm going to turn our output down a tiny bit so we're matching on what we went in. So before, after. You hear that we got a lot more crispiness out of this whole drum bus. Now the next thing we're going to do is come over here to halftime. And you're going to probably wonder why I would put halftime on a drum bus. Well, if you have or you want to add an interesting effect to your beat, we could come over here and let's say on the intro we have our drums come in, right? But we want them to come in weird. We want them to have like a weird effect to them. Well, we could add anything on here and then we can automate it. So if we wanted to come in here and use halftime, you can see all the other plugins are off because I was just showing you guys those. But let's turn halftime on. I gave this weird setting to it. If I press play, you're going to hear how weird these drums sound. Right? And that's why I like halftime over gross beat, because you can affect different frequencies that are being affected. Because if I were to take this and go over here like this, it's just normal halftime. But if I allow a little bit of that low end to not be affected and some of that high end to not be affected, you get this weird sound. However much you put over here, right? However much you're allowing to come through. So what we could do is come over here to this mix knob and create automation clip, right? Now we have this cool little automation clip. So let's go ahead and make 2 of them. And on this one, we're going to go make unique and we're going to turn it off. So this is all we're going to do. And now it's off. This one is on. So we know that when this comes in, it's going to turn it off and we'll be okay. If we go over here and press play, our drums are normal. If we go over here, we have this weird effect, right? Doesn't really sound good for this beat, but you get where I'm saying, where you could go with this, right? We can even come over here to this EQ. We could turn on this EQ and we could come over here and do something like this. And then we can go to the on and off button, create automation clip, and easily tell it to turn off when the drums come in. But we want to have this weird effect. So again, we come over here, we make this one unique, and now we have an on and off switch. Here's on, here's off, right? If we come over here, now we'll have this weird effect on it. Sounds like it's underwater. It's slowly going to start to fade, and then when we come over here, it's normal. If you add a ginormous reverb, you can come over here, and you could take this wet knob, and you can create automation clip. And as it starts to fade down, there's going to be less reverb. You can create something weird like this. Who knows what you want to do, right? And then you could just have it go. Then you can get really creative with it, and it's only going to affect the drum bus. So there's really cool things you could do when you use bus channels and group all of a certain element of your beat to that channel and start affecting it. So I hope you guys liked this tutorial. If you did, leave a thumbs up. You can follow me on all social medias at LifestyleDidIt. Make sure to hit my site, lifestyledidit.com, for everything else. My new loop kit, Nemo, is out. Go ahead on the site, check that one out. There's some crazy loops in there. I just dropped it about a day ago. Other than that, subscribe to your boy, push notifications. Thanks.